Why, hello, everybody. Let's see who all's gonna pop up on here. How's everybody's day going? That's so good. Yep. Yay, Emma's here! Woohoo! See if Catherine pops up in a little bit or not. Yay! How you doing today, Emma? Day's going great. That's so good. I'm so happy for you. Woo! Yeah. I don't know. I don't have a whole lot to say or what to talk about other than it's windy and cold again. My room is a complete disaster. Uh, that's about it. So yeah, everything's going great. Who am I kidding? Hey, well, they're not showing up, so I'm gonna get started. One last sip of tea. All right. So last time all the kids tried to escape, and um, they all got caught, and we shall see what happens next. Woo-hoo. Okay. Chapter 16. Piper didn't resist when Agent agent, and Dr. Hellion escorted her to the fourth level. Led past row upon row of experiments, she saw the rows covered with black soot and a closed door behind, which the banging of the silver giraffe was no longer heard. Finally, at the far end of the laboratory, Piper was led into a room protected by more security protocols than any other of all insane. At the center of the room stood a strange metal contraption. It looked to Piper like a giant metal frame shaped by the outline of the human body, almost like a life-sized version of what her mother used at Christmas time to cut out gingerbread men from cookie dough. Dr. Hellion approached the contraption reverently and ran her hand down the cold, shining metal with admiration. This device, Piper, is specifically designed to help clear your mind. It's called a Molecular Orienting Limitation Device, or MOLD for short. Dr. Hellion's face appeared very helpful and kind. At a core level, it will adjust you so that you can enjoy a more normal way of life. At Dr. Hellion's command, Nurse Toll and agent lifted Piper up and placed her into the center of the metal shape. As we input your information into this computer over here, Dr. Hellion indicated, where a scientist was working by a monitor against the wall, it communicates with the mold and instructs it to create the exact normal specifications for someone of your age and sex. While you relax, the mold will help you discover what it feels like to be normal, just like everyone else. Wouldn't you like that? I can't rightly say. Piper didn't know what she wanted anymore. She no longer had any frame of reference. With a few more keystrokes, the scientist completed his data entry, and the metal frame began to contract around Piper from all sides. It quickly went from feeling snug to pressing against her with a force that made her scream out in agony. Ah! You'll learn to love that feeling, Piper, Dr. Hellion caught the scientist's eye. I think it would be best served, Piper, if you increase the intensity, Dr. Fields. Yay! Oh, everyone's here! Welcome! Things are getting a little intense now. So, Dr. Fields' Dr. Fields' brow furrowed when he looked as though he wanted to object, but then thought the better of it. Silently he complied, and after a few more pecks at the computer, the metal instantly responded to the commands and squeezed Piper even more tightly. Ow! Piper's eyes widened and she couldn't catch her breath. The mold was literally crushing the life out of her. It took all of her strength just to stop herself from begging for mercy. I'm told that the more you resist, the more painful it is. When you learn to relax and accept it, you'll feel nothing but comfort and safety. Dr. Hellion smiled reassuringly. Dr. Fields, I believe that Piper still requires greater assistance. Please increase the intensity. This time Dr. Fields was not able to restrain himself. But Dr. Hellion, it's already at the maximum level. Letitia Hellion turned with icy calmness and fixed Dr. Fields with dead eyes. Is there a problem? Dr. Fields inched forward and lowered his voice fearfully. Dr. Hellion, if I increase it anymore, it could cause permanent damage, maybe even cripple her. It's not. I can't. It isn't recommended. Thank you, Dr. Fields, for that information. Shall I ask someone else to come in and take over your responsibilities? Beads of sweat on Dr. Field's brow became tiny rivers. His hands hesitated and then trembled as they returned to the computer. Even as he did it, Dr. Fields knew that on the day he died, this was the moment he would remember with the most regret. He couldn't bring himself to look at Piper as the metal responded one more time, and somehow, although he couldn't imagine at this point how it might be possible, pushed Piper in further. Ah! Piper would have begged if she had been able to speak. It took all of her resources just to draw breath. Perfect. That's much better. Dr. Hellion approved. Now, Piper, when I see you again, you will not only never remember the fact that you flew, but you will never have the desire to do so again. Flying is a nasty habit. It hurts people. It hurts you. But Piper had to struggle through the pain of remembering how to speak. I love flying. No, Piper, you don't. You just think you do. Soon you'll know that you were mistaken, just like you were mistaken about the escape. Dr. Hellion snatched Piper's wooden bird from around her neck, smiled brightly, and left the room. Nurse Toll and Agent A Agent promptly followed her on her heels, leaving Dr. Fields behind. I'm so sorry, Dr. Fields mumbled and fled. He sealed the door and left Piper alone with her agony. Oh, it hurts, make it stop, make it stop! Piper begged no one in particular. The pain was unimaginable. The word pain couldn't even contain the feeling. It was like being hit by a train, specifically the moment after you're hit, but before you die and are given the comfort of oblivion. Oh, Ma! Pa, help me! Someone help me! A tiny wiggling motion moved against Piper's leg, then it wiggled some more and traveled up toward her waist until the white linen handkerchief her ma had given her was pushed out of her pocket and fell to the floor below. A moment later, Sebastian squirmed free of the pocket, hopped over the metal, and found a perch on the wall at eye level with Piper. He settled himself across from her. The sight of her dear black cricket brought tears to Piper's eyes. You're a sight for sore eyes. She was so grateful that she wasn't alone. I guess you're not far from where I first found you, huh? I'm sorry about that. Probably I should have got you out sooner. But see over there. But see over there. Piper moved her eyes, the only part of her capable of movement toward the direction of the vent. You could use that if you had a mind to, but that leads somewhere. Bet that leads somewhere. Sebastian saw the vent, but turned his black face back to Piper and didn't move. He obviously had no intention of going anywhere. If you change your mind, I won't hold it against you. The pain caught up with Piper again, and she fought it with everything she had. Piper? Startled, Piper's eyes darted about the room, but she could see nothing. Piper McLeod? The voice spoke again. It was the same voice Piper had heard in her room back in Lowland Country, the one Dr. Hellion had warned her about. Just as Piper had suspected and feared, it had been stalking her. Suddenly, a shadow passed before the door. Moments later, she overheard security camera violently snapping free from its casing and fell to the floor. Terrified, Piper couldn't move away or defend herself, and was forced to watch in horror as the shadow moved toward her closer and closer. The nearer it came, the more substance it gathered until the shadow morphed into a man. He was dressed in black, a backpack about his shoulders. He had a wiry frame that was perpetually in motion and rippled with muscles. He had the harried look of someone who is constantly on the run and under the gun. The dark circles under his eyes spoke of hard decisions and a life lived with deep regrets. Piper McLeod, he asked with a quiet authority that reverberated throughout the room. I am. How'd you do that? Do what? He had already slipped the backpack off his shoulders and thrown it to the ground in quick movements. Unzipping it, he pulled out specific instruments with practiced movements. You weren't there, and now you are. How'd you appear like that? Oh, you mean how was I invisible? I don't know. How do you fly? No one had ever asked Piper that before. I don't know. Then I don't know either. The man placed gray plasticine against the computer control panel. Listen to me, we don't have much time. I'm Jay, and I've been following you and watching you for a long time. I'm here to get you out. Dr. Hellion told me you're up to no good. He quickly looked up from his work. And you believe her? Piper didn't answer. If I wanted to hurt you, you'd be dead already. I'm here to help you, to get you out. After all Piper had been through, she wasn't sure what to believe anymore. Seeing her hesitation, Jay put down his tools. Look at me. Unless you trust me, they're going to make you forget you ever flew. Is that what you want? No. As Betty always said, beggars can't be choosers, and Piper was hardly in a position to be choosy. Jay nodded and went back to work. He was an expert at what he did. Retrievals were never easy, and sometimes things went terribly wrong. He had to be careful and make sure Piper was up to taking direction. You'll have to do what I say when I say, or they'll snap you back in here so fast it will make your head spin. He was attaching wires between a small clock and the plasticine. Relief washed over Piper. In precious moments, this man could take away the terrible pain, and freedom would be hers. Her prayers had been answered, and tears of relief clouded her vision. Did you get the others already, or do you need me to show you where they are? I'm only here for you. Jay was definitive on this point. And you'll come back for them later? That won't be possible. It's taken me weeks to reach you undetected. The security in this place, I'll be lucky to get you out in one piece. But in a matter of mere moments, Piper's top of the mountain elation fell to 20 leagues beneath the sea despair. But we can't leave them behind! It can't be helped. There's only so much I can do. Jay was a realist, and he didn't candy coat anything. Life was hard, and as far as he was concerned, people were better off dealing with cold, hard facts. You have to try. Try? He shook his head in disbelief. Don't talk to me about trying. It's all I've ever done my whole life. You don't know what's been happening. There used to be thousands of us. But now you down here are all the only young ones left. Letitia Hellion has seen to that. You're it. But I'm here for you. Jay set the clock on the timer, and it started to count down from 60 seconds. You are exceptional, Piper McCloud. Do you know how incredibly rare it is? It is to do what you do, to fly. It's unheard of. But close your eyes. There's going to be a small detonation. He took cover at the side of the room. I won't go without them. Jay looked up, shocked. Because of my flying, they're all in trouble. Dr. Hellion says that if I break the rules again, she's going to take it out on them. If I leave, they find out, and if I leave and they find out I'm missing, there's no telling what'll happen to my friends. You can't make yourself responsible for what she does. It's not your fault. I still can't go with you. I won't take no for an answer. I can't! Piper screamed. She didn't have the strength to fight the pain and Jay at the same time. If you try to take me, I'll scream, and I'll let 'em know what you're up to. You won't get more than 2 feet out of that Duberfield. They'll be all over us. Jay's clock was counting back from 30, and he began to pace back and forth and pull at his hair. Piper had the distinct feeling that he was itching for a cigarette by the way his fingers were twitching and going to his mouth, like he was expecting to find one dangling there. She's already brainwashed you. If you let me take you out of here, I can fix that. No. No matter what, Piper wasn't going to hurt anyone else ever again. Jay visibly deflated and sighed with defeat. Rushing to the clock, he quickly unwired it. A simmering rage seemed to bubble up inside him. We don't have the resources she has. Every day she stamps out another species, snatches another kid, and we have to sit and watch her do it. Suddenly, he violently punched the wall. What will become of us? I'm sorry, Piper wept miserably. Jay ran a hand through his hair, sorting through the rubble of the debacle. It's not your fault. I was too late. I should have found a way to get to you sooner. He gathered up his bits and pieces, shoving them aimlessly into his backpack. Piper didn't know what to say. She couldn't be sorrier or feel worse. After Jay put the last of his instruments away, he picked up Betty's white linen handkerchief off of the floor and held it in his hand. He ran his fingers slowly over a tiny embroidered bluebird. I'll be back for you, Piper. Jay had steely resolve in his eyes, and he gently placed the handkerchief in his pocket closest to his heart. Slowly he began to fade, and then he disappeared altogether. The room appeared empty, but Jay's voice was close by. I'll find a way. After Jay departed for good, Piper was left with only Sebastian and the terrible pain to keep her company. Through the darkest hours of the night, she bravely waged her silent battle. It wasn't until dawn approached that her last reserves of energy dwindled. Her breaths came in short rasps, and Sebastian drew close. The pain, Piper whispered to Sebastian. I can't. She wanted to apologize to Sebastian for not being able to save him, but was too weak to talk. Sebastian watched as her body went limp. Beside himself, he jumped up and down, but Piper remained silent and still. In desperation, Sebastian stood upright on his hind legs and inhaled deeply. Opening his mouth wide, he began to sing, not with the voice of a cricket, but with the deep, rich sounds of an operatic tenor. I don't dare try to sing this, so you're welcome. I've seen the coming of the dawn. Sebastian's voice was so extraordinary that Piper's eyes flickered and then opened, and she managed to focus on the little black cricket singing his heart out. Unconcernedly watching the passing of the day, whiled away my hours in joyful play, I lived to simply sing the song of love and play the music of my heart. The music filled up every space in the room and then spilled outward toward the vent, through the vent, and quickly traveled through the entire facility of Insane. In the laboratory, the silver giraffe raised his head, listening to the music. Stretching his long neck so that he could press his ear right up to the vent on the ceiling, he drank in every note. The red rose, no longer feisty, paused in its coughing to listen to the music. In the facility's main security room, sensors promptly notified Agent A Agent of the sound disturbance. He instantly activated the silent alarm and reached for the phone. Dr. Hellion, yes, we have another situation. After the events of the evening, no one had been able to sleep on level 13. As the music wafted down the dormitory hallway, kids sat up in their beds and listened in wonder. Dancing and playing in the light, I am filled with passion and delight. In her nightdress, Lily came out into the hallway as though in a trance. She was soon joined by the others. Where is that coming from? It's so beautiful. It's the cricket, Conrad stated plainly. That tiny cricket's making all that sound? They find them in the floorboards of opera houses. Conrad shrugged and returned to his bed. He didn't want to be with the others. He couldn't look them in the face. My voice is free. It rises and floats away from me. I'm unable to escape these walls. My body will not float like my song's plaintive calls. Piper's chest swelled, and the power of the music banished any pain. Her body tingled and emboldened with here it is again, Herculean strength. She effortlessly pushed against the mold, causing it to groan under the pressure. It's coming from the testing laboratory. How is that possible? Dr. Hellion was applying her lipstick faster than she would have liked. Agent A Agent had met her in the elevator, and they were on their way to the 4th level. We have agents standing by. This is the second disturbance in one night. Dr. Hellion's voice was almost irritated. Before Piper McCloud showed up, we went 7 years without an incident. 7 long years, and now we have 2 in one night. She snapped her lipstick shut. This stops now. Only in my mind I float free as my song, and I fly to a home where I belong. There are those who know my heart well. Sing, sing, sing with my song spell. The sun was just about to rise in lowland country, but Joe McLeod had not been able to sleep. Sitting on the windowsill of his bedroom, he gazed at the fast-fading stars on the morning sky. It was going to be a good, clear day. Mr. McLeod, you'll catch your death from that morning air. Betty turned over, discovering Joe in his underwear on the open windowsill. The weather had turned cold, but Joe didn't seem to notice. As usual, Joe didn't have much to say, but Betty knew what he was thinking all the same. She'll be home soon enough. She sure have liked the sky, Joe sighed. They snatched my voice, held me against my choice. I forget all that was mine, yet I reached to dream it one last time. The cricket's voice sang not for the ears, but for the heart. His words resonated with the strength and truth that transfixed all 9 children in the dormitory hallway as the music permeated their very cells. In no time at all, the song hit at their core, and a sharp pain stabbed them squarely in the chest. The drugs Letitia Hellion had pumped into them were neutralized, and all fears, both big and small, were forced out, leaving their mouths buzzing with the taste of freedom. Piper was right, Kimber chirped. We've got to get out of here. You got that right, for once Smitty agreed with Kimber. We'll escape, Nayland said forcefully, and Ahmed was silent. The singing affected Conrad too, but his heart was so crowded by meanness and madness that the beauty of the song was too painful to bear. He writhed in pain, his bedsheets tangling around his legs. As much as he resisted, the song gnawed at the meanness and madness inside of him. I struggled to the last, but my light is fading fast, a lone warrior waging a brutal fight against an endless night. Dr. Hellion, Agent A Agent, and a security team burst into the room where Piper was being held. As the door opened, the music crashed against them, battering their defenses. Over there, Dr. Hellion, Agent A Agent pointed to where Sebastian sang. I fight for escape, even if the notes of this song are the only part of me to leave. Examining the cricket, Letitia Hellion came as close as she had come in a long time to feeling an emotion. As it started to bubble up inside of her, she firmly clamped down on it and instead turned to Agent A. Agent. "Give me your shoe." Agent A. Agent immediately complied. I rise up out of here, reaching for the things I hold dear. The Voculus Romalia microptera, which was the name scientists had given to Sebastian, wait their whole lives to sing one song. When they start to sing that song, it often lasts for days, sometimes weeks, and they sing about everything they've ever heard and seen and learned in their lives. As Sebastian had only spent a few short months in the Vienna State Opera House before being captured and imprisoned inside insane, the only thing he had experienced that was worth singing about was inspired by the time he had spent with Piper McLeod, but that was enough. I will not stay silent. I shall not remain still. In the laboratory, the glow created by the silver giraffe blinded the spiders that made cobwebs in the ceiling of the cell. In one great shake, the red rose shook off all of the black soot in its leaves and bloomed with rebel daring. In the dormitory hallway, the children cheered and cried, while Conrad screamed in pain as the meanness and madness was driven from him. Dr. Hellion snatched the offered shoe from Agent A. Agent and raised it high in the air. "No!" Piper shrieked. I sing to the end." In one swift motion, Dr. Hellion hit hard and did not miss her mark. Sebastian's voice was forever silenced. From that moment on, Piper would remember nothing. End of chapter 16. Ah! So sad! Ah. Yes, Sonic, he came back. He was on vacation. Ah! I know, I would love to hear what the song sounds like. I'm not quite there yet as a musician. Anyway, chapter 17. Conrad had betrayed Piper and betrayed them all. He cut a deal with Dr. Hellion and told her everything. It was the only logical choice available to him at that time. On the afternoon of the escape, when Dr. Hellion summoned Conrad to her office, he knew that she knew something. She knew he knew she knew. "Conrad, please sit down." Conrad remained standing. Letitia Hellion's fresh coat of lipstick glistened, and she leaned back in her chair with an expression that was welcoming and conveyed warmth. "I know you are up to something. I know the others are involved too." In the end, it had been Piper herself who had tipped Dr. Hellion off. The week before, when Letitia had arrived at the dormitory to invite Piper for an evening stroll, she had found the girl mumbling about being tired, and she was unable to meet her eye. Piper's sudden hatred for her was as transparent as a picture window, and so intense that the child wasn't even able to pretend otherwise. This unexpected turn of events prompted Letitia to quickly return to her office and order a special security team to investigate the matter. It went without saying that Letitia Hellion's greatest fear was that Jay had, despite all her precautions, gotten to Piper. For weeks she'd sensed his presence, and knowing Jay as she did, Letitia could expect him to be reckless, unpredictable, and willing to go to any extreme. There was a lot of history between the two, and that history had taught Letitia, in no uncertain terms, never to underestimate Jay. Indeed, he was the one person who posed a real threat to her plan, while at the same time being the very same person that the facility's security could neither repel nor contain. To her very great relief, the security report had come back detailing secret midnight meetings on level 13, among many other things. Naturally, Letitia Hellion did not only knew exactly what was going on, but how to deal with it. "It's an escape, I presume." Dr. Hellion watched Conrad closely, but he gave nothing away, and his features leveled into an inscrutable, neutral expression. "You alone are smart enough to understand that it won't work, which is why I'm talking to you. I assume the others don't know the consequences they'll face when caught?" "No, I wouldn't have told them either. How can a child face torture, or having the very life squeezed out of their body and enduring a living death? With stakes so high, they probably wouldn't be able to go through with it. I worry for the little ones the most, don't you? Can Jasper survive it, or Lily? They're so young and fragile, and under the circumstances, it'll be necessary to use extraordinary means." Conrad wasn't about to be enticed into joining the discussion until Dr. Hellion's hand was laid bare and all her cards were on the table. I'm not trying to scare you, Conrad, and I know that you understand that these are not empty threats. I realize that you don't have all the information at your disposal to make the best decision for you personally, though. Dr. Hellion retrieved 3 sheets of paper. Your piece de resistance. She tossed them in front of Conrad. I spoke with your father this morning. Conrad looked up, startled. Such a nice man. I've I've been urging him for some time now to allow us to perform a new procedure that would greatly assist you. This morning he finally signed the release form. Dr. Hellion flipped the page over and pointed to his father's signature. See, it is now at my sole discretion to determine whether to perform this wonderful new operation or not. It's called a lobotomy. Conrad's mouth hung open as his eyes jumped ahead, speed reading the form. Well, that's a dramatic way of putting it. It's much more localized and specific. We believe that you are suffering from frontal lobe disease, meaning the part of your brain that is responsible for your higher reasoning, planning, and problem solving is malfunctioning and causing you great distress. Therefore, it naturally follows that it must be removed. Dr. Hellion paused. It would really help you, Conrad, to think more clearly, to slow down and not be so agitated. I think you'd be very happy with the results. Conrad had no words. Her plan was brilliant, even he had to admit that, and the stakes compelling. If he tried to escape and was caught, his frontal lobe would be removed. Conrad knew Dr. Hellion well enough to know that she wasn't bluffing. Undoubtedly, she already had the entire facility on high alert and lockdown, which meant escape was already impossible. And Conrad was desperate. Desperate times call for desperate measures. This left him with only one option and one question. What's in it for me? After Conrad left that day, Letitia Hellion sat at her desk and carefully reapplied her lipstick. She performed this action each hour on the hour, without fail. The name of her lipstick was Red Giggles, but Dr. Hellion had never giggled once while wearing it. This was probably because Letitia Hellion hadn't felt anything, either physically or emotionally, for years, least of all like giggling. She gave masterful impressions of emotions, which she created by carefully contrived movements of her eyes or lips, simulating caring or happiness or understanding. Except for Conrad. No one had ever seen through Letitia's pretense. But then people were so ridiculously easy to fool. Most of the time they saw what they wanted to see, which was precisely why she invested so much time and energy in constructing a perfect outward appearance. Exquisitely groomed hair, lipstick always in place, beautiful couture clothing, and an elegant posture all work to cleverly distract people from actually seeing her, the real her underneath it all. The Letitia Hellion, who once upon a time had felt waves of panic, nausea, and revulsion whenever she encountered anything abnormal or unusual, and who unequivocally decided long ago that the world was a much, much better place without such things. This pivotal decision became a simple equation to live by. Normal equals good, and abnormal equals bad. Ergo, all abnormality must become normal or be destroyed. To this end, Dr. Letitia Hellion devoted her life's work. The upside of her decision was undeniable. Her frayed nerves became instantly suited to black and white, manageable and containable. At the same time, her banishment of the murky grayness of it all effectively buried any feeling she ever had, and it was precisely the lack of feeling that allowed her to calmly witness unspeakable torture in plants who had no voice, in animals who had no one to understand their cries, and in children who were too weak to fight back. Without feeling, she had subjugated her humanity to a monstrous and play-acted version of a real person. With her lipstick artfully painted across her delicate lips, Letitia pressed them together one last time, satisfied with the effect, and began preparations to deal with the escape. The morning after the attempted escape, Conrad had demanded to see Dr. Hellion, but she made him wait a full week before finally granting him an audience, by which time he was trembling with rage. We had a deal. You said that if I told you about the others, you'd release me. I told you everything. I handed them all to you on a silver platter, and now you need to honor our agreement. You are correct. That was the deal. Dr. Hellion was working on her computer and could only give Conrad half of her attention. She had a lot of work to do, and Conrad was no longer a top priority. She tossed him his release papers. There's just one last detail to complete, and you may go. What detail? Conrad picked up the papers and quickly scanned through them. On page 3, I need an adult guardian signature, accepting legal responsibility for you from this point on. What? This had not been discussed, and Conrad was not in the mood. When you came here, I became your legal guardian, and in order to be released from that position, someone else must claim it. An 11-year-old boy cannot be released on his own recognizance. It's against the law, so I need a name. Dr. Hellion waited. Any name. I'll have my father sign it when I return home. Unfortunately, you can't be released without a signature. Under the circumstances, I'm prepared to accept a verbal commitment. To expedite the process, I have your father on line 1, and he will speak with you right now. My father? Conrad was shocked. He hadn't spoken with his father in over 4 years. At first, when he'd arrived at the facility, he'd cleverly orchestrated ways to get phones and call his father's office in a desperate bid to get help. Each time, some snot-nosed assistant would inform him that Senator Harrington was unable to take his call. Then one day, a new assistant accused Conrad of maliciously playing some sort of prank because everyone knew the senator had no son, that he and his wife had just become the proud parents of a baby girl. And that was how Conrad learned that he had a sister, and he marked that the last day he ever tried to contact his father. Conrad, as I said, your father is on line 1. Dr. Hellion wanted to get this over with. She didn't like to waste her time or energy on a hopeless case. Conrad hated himself for getting excited, but he was. He yearned to hear his father's voice. He picked up the phone with a quivering hand. Hello, Father? It was noon in Washington, D.C., and Conrad Harrington II was about to be late for a very important lunch. He juggled files and the phone as he left his office. Hey, Sport, good to hear from you. Father, Dr. Hellion tells me you're doing one heck of a good job, and your mother and I are proud of you. Senator Harrington dashed for an elevator. Keep up the good work. Conrad recognized the tone in his father's voice as the one he used to glad hand his bigger campaign contributors. Father, listen to me. I can come home now, and Oh, yes, Dr. Hellion mentioned something about that, Sport. The thing is that your mother and I feel it's a little bit too soon, especially as things are going so well for you there. Like I always say, if it's not broke, don't fix it. No, Father, I need to come home now. Connie, it's real great hearing your voice, Sport. You sound fantastic. Let's talk soon. No, don't hang up. Wait, you need to understand that. Conrad stopped talking, while the dial tone buzzed in his ear. Still, he couldn't let go of the phone. After all that had happened, after everything he'd done, it had all come down to this phone call, and he'd hardly said more than a few words. He'd failed. He'd sold out Piper and the others too, and now he had been sold out. Well, Conrad, I'm sorry that didn't work out for you the way we'd hoped. You never had any intention of letting me go. You lied to me. No, Conrad, we both lied to you. Your father also retracted his approval for that cranial operation, which means that neither of us gets what we want. I don't want you here any more than you want to stay. Frankly, I think you're a bad influence and make everything more difficult for everyone. And as much as I'd like to help you, I can't. My hands are tied. It was a stalemate once again, and they were back to where they'd started. Conrad should have known better than to negotiate with Dr. Hellion. What was he thinking? Maybe, just maybe, Piper had been right. Maybe he wasn't as smart as he thought. Conrad? There was nothing left to say, and Dr. Hellion needed Conrad to get out of her office. He was a living, walking reminder of her failure, and no one wants that hanging around. Is there anything else, Conrad? Huh? Oh. Conrad was drawn back from his thoughts to find that he still had the phone in his hand. It took all his concentration and willpower to open his fingers and place it back in the cradle. Conrad left Dr. Hellion's office in a daze, and he remained that way for over 3 weeks. In class, Conrad gazed off blankly and did not answer questions, did not participate, did not argue that the theory of relativity was outdated and limited. At mealtimes, he ate mechanically and without thought, and he went to bed at lights out and didn't work on his secret projects. His transformation was so startling that Professor Mumblebee even reported to Dr. Hellion that there might be opportunities to rehabilitate Conrad Harrington yet. During those weeks, only one thought dominated Conrad's existence. He wrestled with it endlessly to try to understand it. How was it that I failed? I thought of everything. I weighed every option, considered every aspect. I made all the right choices, and still I didn't come to the right answer. How is that possible? Finally, it came to him. His mind, all powerful, brilliantly calculating, analyzing, processing, didn't have the answers. His mind, Conrad realized all at once in a luminous flash of understanding, had information, not answers. The answers, Conrad suddenly knew, came from somewhere else entirely. The revelation was so stunning that it immobilized Conrad completely. Harrington, you got something wrong with your ears? Nurse Toll barked when Conrad failed to get out of bed. That was the breakfast bell, boy, and if you don't hustle, you'll be on my list. Conrad still didn't move, didn't respond. Later that day, when a doctor was called for, Conrad remained unresponsive. He's in no danger, the doctor whispered to Nurse Toll. He's had a nervous breakdown. Just let him rest. He'll snap out of it sooner or later. Wish it was that easy. Conrad wasn't having a nervous breakdown, and he didn't care if they thought that he was. The problem was that Conrad couldn't figure out where his answers were going to come from, and until he could, he wasn't sure how to go on living. His mind was the only thing he'd ever relied upon, and no one had told him or even hinted that there could be another way. So how was he to find the answers if they weren't in his mind? Where were they hiding? How could he get to them? Piper had known. Something in her had just known what to do, and she wasn't even that smart. Conrad wasn't being mean, only factual. Piper simply didn't have the same capacity for intellectual thought that he had, and yet she knew things that he didn't. How was that possible? Where were her answers coming from? Days turned to weeks, and Conrad remained silent and still. Kids began talking in hushed whispers in the dormitory hallway by his room. Dr. Hellion contacted Senator Harrington to appraise him of his son's situation. Fine, Dr. Hellion. Thanks for the call. I've got to jump into a meeting right now, and you don't need to contact me again unless the situation gets worse. Is that clear? Dr. Hellion understood perfectly. Conrad was her problem, and the senator didn't want to hear about it. He wanted him out of sight and out of mind, and her calls were an irritation at best, and a threat to his peace of mind at worst. Several weeks more passed, and Conrad sank deeper and deeper into blackness until a single flickering ray of light, like a tiny candle on a gusty day, broke through. Piper had the answer, and had always had it, Conrad realized, as he lay curled up under his covers. Why hadn't he paid closer attention and listened to her before? And if Piper knew, then as soon as she was released, he could ask her, and then he would know too. It was a slender and feeble hope at best, but Conrad clung to it, and it provided him with enough incentive to get out of bed and function, such that he could attend class again. Each day he found himself sitting on the edge of his seat in a state of expectant anticipation. Was today going to be the day that Piper would return? Would he discover where to look for the answers that day? It was a hard winter that year. The snow got so deep that for a time the facility was blocked off from the outside world altogether. Spring came late and struggled to slough off the snow, but at long last the white cold melted away and a tentative green covered the earth. As was often the case, Smitty was the first one to see it. It's Piper! She's out! She's out! Smitty came screaming into the library. Smitty came screaming into the library. Conrad leapt to his feet and violently grabbed Smitty's shoulder, shaking him. Where? Where is she? Conrad hadn't spoken in weeks, and his voice was hoarse. The dining! Conrad ran before Smitty could even complete his sentence. The others were hot on his heels. Myrtle, of course, was the first to arrive and discovered Piper sitting quiet and still at the dining table. A sandwich sat neatly on a plate in front of her, and she was slowly chewing. Although Conrad was not aware of it, all of the kids had waited for Piper's release with impatient fervor. More than anything, they wanted Piper back. Nothing was the same without her. After the mad dash, the kids all stopped dead, feasting their eyes on Piper. Piper? Violet trembled, afraid of what might happen next. Piper looked up from her meal and smiled. Relief spread through the waiting faces, and they rushed together around her, excitedly reaching out to touch her. Piper, we missed you! We knew you'd be back! Guess you showed old Hal a thing or two, huh? Smitty was overjoyed. Piper smiled. Conrad watched her closely. He saw that she was paler and thinner. There was also a fragile quality about her, like she could be blown away by a hard wind. All of that was understandable, though, considering what she must have gone through over the last few months. So what happened? Kimber pressed. Yeah, where have you been hiding? Ahmed asked. Piper shrugged. Lily moved in closer and whispered, Can you still fly? Fly? Piper smiled. Maybe you can fly tonight after lights out. Piper shook her head. I don't understand. You know, Piper, Smitty persisted. Fine, you fly. Piper became more flustered. Fly where? No, you fly, Kimber helped. You're a flyer, Piper. Looking between the hopeful and expectant faces surrounding her, Piper's confusion mounted. What do you mean? Conrad's heart sank, his worst fear realized. She doesn't know what you're talking about. Leave her alone. Conrad turned away. No, she knows! Violet couldn't believe otherwise. You remember, right, Piper? Piper's eyes were blank and her smile vacant. She nodded, but there was no understanding behind it. All of the people around her looked as though they were familiar, but Piper couldn't quite place them. They were talking so fast, so nothing they said made sense. She wished they would slow down. She was trying her utmost to follow along, but her mind couldn't quite seem to grasp words. I'm Piper. Piper smiled at the girl closest to her. What's your name? My name? Piper, it's me, Violet. Violet took Piper's hand and squeezed it with alarm and fear. Just think, Piper, think hard. You can't you can remember if you want to. I'm your friend, Violet. I'm Smitty. Remember, Piper? Remember the escape? And Sebastian and how he sang? Yeah, we all heard it. We all heard it, Piper. It was so beautiful. We've been waiting for you so that you can escape again. Except this time it'll work out. Piper's confusion mounted. Escape what? Stop it, just stop it. She's gone. Conrad banged his fist on the table. She's not Piper anymore. Silence fell over the group. Piper returned to placidly chewing on her sandwich. Just like the countless others Conrad had seen over the years, Piper had been reduced to an empty shell, a blank slate for Dr. Hellion to write on. A bell rang in the distance, calling them to afternoon classes. Better not be late, Piper smiled. With her hand, she pushed herself away from the table and reached for two silver cranes that were propped up against the chair. In all of the fuss, they'd escaped everyone's notice. With painful difficulty, Piper struggled her way up to a standing position, heavily reliant on metal support braces that had been wrapped around her mangled legs. Even with the cranes and the braces, Piper's movement was pure agony. Not only could Piper no longer fly, she could no longer walk. Dr. Hellion had crippled her. Lily gasped and tears came to Violet's eyes. What have they done to her? 10 children mutely watched through clouded vision as Piper hobbled pitifully away, bent and broken. End of chapter 17. Chapter 18. Everyone was late for afternoon class. Normally, this would have been insistent cause for Professor Mumblebee to become irate and mete out detentions. Fortunately, it had been a busy morning at Insane. Class, a new student is joining us. His name is Boris Yeltsinov. I expect you all make him welcome, Professor Mumblebee declared. Boris slouched at the front of the class. He was a stocky boy who looked to be about 9 years old and was shyly hanging his closely cropped head. His intense social embarrassment was serving no useful purpose. Absolutely no one in the class was paying the least bit of attention to him. Lily didn't care what his gift was. Smitty wasn't holding any bets, and, like everyone else, Kimber couldn't take her eyes off Piper. Maybe if we push her off something, she'll remember how to fly, Nayland whispered to Conrad. You're not pushing Piper off anything, Violet turned in her seat and confronted Nayland with blazing eyes. Mr. Yeltsinov, you may sit with Mr. Mustafa and Mr. Mustafa over there, and they will assist you. Boris approached Nayland and Ahmed, who were less than hospitable hosts. Just that morning, Boris had just been transforming street rats into stone and then lobbing them at local gang members in a Moscow slum. His battle was suddenly halted by a flurry of frenzied activity that culminated in an introduction to Dr. Hellion and a helicopter ride. Now we will be reviewing the spring science projects. Professor Mumblebee paused to allow for the customary groaning, followed by the rolling of eyes. Neither reaction materialized, and the funeral atmosphere in the classroom threw him off. Well then, let us begin. Mr. Harrington, you will be first. Come to the front of the room and present your science project. Conrad shuffled to the front of the class, like a zombie. Conrad Conrad cleared his throat. My project is on Suddenly, Conrad couldn't remember anything about his science project. It had got completely out of his head. Uh, my project is on, it's on. Time bent around Conrad. It slowed and changed. A noise roared in his ears, like a big wave approaching. Piper is gone. Another one lost. Conrad saw Piper. He saw the faces of the others looking at him. He saw Boris, but he was Ang Chung, and then Bella Lovely, and so many others, all at the same time. Mr. Harrington? Professor Mumblebee prompted. Yes, my science project is about the war. The roar of a wave that only Conrad could hear hit him full force. He was and wasn't himself all at once. He was in the classroom and watching the classroom from afar all at the same time. My my project is, and then it happened. Snap. Like the cosmos had become a chiropractor, Conrad's vertebrae popped into place with one swift jolt. Pop! The wayward pieces of him got whipped together and then rearranged into a new order. His eyes refocused, and he stood in an endless ocean of stillness and silence. My science project is on time travel. Conrad's voice filled with quiet confidence and conviction. Professor Mumblebee couldn't believe his ears. 9, Mr. Harrington, 9! Your science project is on magnets! No, Professor Mumblebee. No, it's not. It's on time travel. Mr. Harrington, Professor Mumblebee snapped. You will tell us about the magnets now. No! Conrad yelled so loudly and for so long in a voice filled with so much primal rage that it electrified every member of the classroom. Conrad hadn't planned on doing it. Indeed, when his mouth closed, it seemed as though it had come from some strange place inside. Dead silence in the classroom. A shiver traveled up and down Professor Mumblebee's spine. My project is on time travel, Professor Mumblebee. Conrad quietly repeated in the silence. But you won't have the privilege of hearing it because I'm leaving right now. What? Conrad's fellow students could not have been more stunned. Eyes widened and jaws visibly hung open in shock. Conrad spoke slowly, as though the words were coming to him just before he uttered them. All of us need to get out. Right now. Conrad looked into the faces of his classmates. Right now, he repeated. Professor Mumblebee remembered himself. Mr. Harrington, you will calm yourself right now, or you'll do what? Is that what you're going to do? Wait, I read that wrong. Or you'll what? Is that what you're going to do? He pointed at Piper, who didn't appear to understand anything that was going on behind her vacant, happy expression. So what? You'll do it to us anyway, sooner or later. So I say, bring it on. You have taken leave of your senses, Mr. Harrington, and I will get Dr. Hellions this instant. Conrad blocked Professor Mumblebee's path to the door. You'll do nothing unless I say so. After 40 years of teaching these children, Professor Mumblebee had prepared for everything but this. Students were spontaneously rising from their seats and forming a circle around him. He sensed something in the students that he'd never sensed in the classroom before, during all of his time as a teacher and insane. The absence of fear. Sit down now, and no one will be punished. I tell you this truly. Jasper, sit down. Violet, take your seat. Professor Mumblebee acted angry to cover his terror. Conrad, I've warned you. Then we can reconsider ourselves both warned. Conrad's eyes didn't flicker away. Professor Mumblebee pushed Conrad aside and made for the door. He only managed to take 2 steps before he felt strong arms holding him in an iron grip. Sit, Daisy said. Professor Mumblebee sat because he had no choice. Everything happened at once. There was no forethought, but everyone seemed to know what they had to do all the same. Myrtle got a rope, and while Daisy held Professor Mumblebee, they tied him to a chair. While Professor Mumblebee resisted, Kimber assisted in keeping him still with several thousand volts of electricity. Smitty went for the door and kept a lookout. Conrad and the others gathered around the dry erase board and quickly made a plan. We're getting out. How? We haven't planned anything. True, but they aren't prepared either, and we have the element of surprise working in our favor. Conrad suddenly got an idea. What time is it? 4:55 p.m. Good. At 5, the freight elevator stops at every level to collect any specimens going to the experiment laboratory on the 4th floor. If we can get to the elevator shaft, we can use that to get to the surface. Conrad was already drawing floor schematics from memory on the dry erase board. I could short out the main power to slow the agents down, Kimbert offered. I'll take out the security cameras. Lily was chafing at the bit of the part of the action. At the bit to be a part of the action, as they all were. The energy in the classroom was electric. Smitty suddenly jolted. Conrad! Conrad! Nurse Toll's leaving his desk. He's on his way to the classroom. What's his ETA? 5 minutes tops, maybe less. Okay, so here's the plan. Conrad? Myrtle will go first. Conrad drew the plan as he spoke, showing them. Kimber, you go here and short out the electricity on this grid. Lily, you take out the camera in this camera. Daisy, you'll run interference. Conrad! Once we get past this checkpoint, it'll be a straight shot down this corridor, and then we'll crawl through the vent system to get to the 8th level. And Conrad! Startled, Conrad turned to find Violet, pale and shrunken. What about Piper? Piper had managed to get to her feet, and she was hobbling about aimlessly with a vacant expression on her face. Not only could she hardly walk, but she was almost completely out of touch with what was going on around her. She won't be able to do that, Conrad. Violet nodded to his plan. Conrad knew immediately that Violet was right. It had taken Piper 10 minutes just to walk to class, and it hadn't even been that far. There was no way they were going to be able to get her out in her condition. Nurse Toll's walking up the stairs, Conrad, Smitty warned. What are we going to do? Violet persisted. Conrad hesitated. Logically, Piper should have been left behind. She was lost to them now anyway. But all the same, Conrad now knew that wasn't the right answer. But what was the right answer? Conrad, Nurse Toll's 2 minutes away. Tops, maybe less. Conrad began to pace back and forth. Should they leave her, and he could come back for her? No, that would never work. What about trying to take her with them? No, even if Daisy carried her out, Piper, so thoroughly brainwashed by Dr. Hellion, was sure to resist or worse, scream for help. What then? What was the right answer? Conrad, what do we do? 9 pairs of eyes waited on his answer, but he didn't have the answer. Where could he find it? Nurse Toll's 90 seconds out and counting. He had no time. Conrad looked at Piper, and suddenly the decision was easy. Here's the plan. I'm staying behind with Piper. You guys will go without me. Lily, buy us some time with Nurse Toll. As simple as that, Conrad had finally done it. For the first time in his life, he had the right answer. It wasn't the best decision, and it certainly wasn't a logical one, but it was the change in Conrad had a powerful effect on all the kids. It was like Conrad had opened a door and stepped through it, and his action somehow invited them all to do the same. It was frightening and new, and none of them moved, except Lily, who roused herself to the hall, where she telekinetically stole the file right out of Nurse Toll's hand, then tossed it in the air. Bits of paper were suddenly flying every way down the corridor, and Nurse Toll was frantically waving his arms about, trying to collect them. Lily figured that they had a good 10 minutes before he would be through collecting it all. She returned to the classroom to find Conrad trying to organize her stunned classmates. You need to get out now, all of you. We made a plan that will work. I'll take care of Nurse Toll. Conrad pushed a few kids toward the door. Still no one moved. I mean it, go now! No. The trembling voice belonged to Jasper. He was even more pale than usual, and he stumbled as he came forward. Piper said we all have to go together. Jasper, there's no time to argue. You have to, Conrad began, but his words fell away as he saw what Jasper was doing. Jasper was looking at his hands. Placing them together, he began to rub them up and down against each other. The contact created a light. It was dim at first, but Jasper's hands moved faster and faster, and the light grew until it was blinding. Then Jasper leaned forward and blew into his hands, which caused the light to change from red to bright white. It became so bright that none of the kids could look at it directly without blinding themselves. What's he doing? Lily whispered. I don't know. Kimber was too stunned to even chew her gum. Approaching Piper, Jasper knelt before her. He placed his glowing hands gently on Piper's legs, and the light immediately jumped into her flesh. Ah! Piper gasped, inhaling sharply. The light took hold of her body, traveling up and down it in waves. The force of it was so strong that it rocked Piper back and forth. Suddenly, her canes went flying, and the metal braces popped off of her legs. At last, the light began to fizzle and fade, and then it disappeared altogether. In its wake, Piper stood straight and tall on 2 healthy legs. Jasper, you have the power to heal! Conrad couldn't believe it. After all of this time, the mystery was solved. I didn't remember, but now I do. Jasper blushed shyly. Piper made me want to remember, and I know that I'm going And I know what I'm gonna do when I get out, too. What? I'm gonna heal sick animals 'cause they can't talk too good, just like Mimi, and I can make them well again." Lily nodded her approval. "That's the best dream of all." Conrad turned his attention to Piper. She still hadn't moved, and her face remained blank. "Piper?" he asked cautiously. "Piper, can you hear me?" Violet came closer. "Piper, are you all right?" Take a break. Ugh, so good. My nose is running. Okay. Okay. There is a place deep, deep inside every person that is hidden and hard to find. If things get bad enough and life gets too hard, though some people will go to that place and never come back from it. Certainly all outward appearances will suggest otherwise. They will look as though they always did. They may even act somewhat like their old selves, but the real truth is, that they are hiding in this place deep inside where no one can touch or hurt them anymore. After Sebastian was gone and the pain of the mold got to be too much, Piper discovered her secret place, locked herself inside, and hid the key. She arranged herself nicely there, happy to be away from the pain and from the struggle of it all. "I plumb can't fathom why I didn't come here sooner," Piper thought to herself. "I've I've got it made in the shade of this place," and Piper could never think of a good enough reason to leave. Indeed, the longer she stayed, the more the things of her life that she had cared so much about began to fade and disappear from her memory altogether. Soon it got so Piper couldn't have returned even if she wanted to. She no longer knew her way back, and even if she had, she could never quite seem to recall that what there was to go back to. Unlike the many who had become lost in their secret places before her, a blinding white light came and found Piper, and covering her hiding place, it woke Piper with its sharp brightness. It wrenched her back to reality and exposed her to the fact that she was in a room full of strangers. "Piper?" the stranger said. "Piper, are you all right?" Piper was shocked to suddenly find herself in such a strange place. She was even more surprised to be surrounded by so many other people. Piper had to admit that there was something very familiar about the strangers. But where or when or how did she know them? And how had she gotten there? Pins and needles tingling up and down her leg muscles as though they'd fallen asleep. Piper got up and carefully placed one foot in front of the other until her legs bore her weight, when suddenly memories began to bubble to the surface of her mind in quick flashes. The boy in front of her was Conrad. She remembered Conrad now. And over there was Violet, and Smitty, and Kimber, and all the rest of them. What's going on? Where am I? Before anyone had the time to answer Piper's questions, she remembered everything all on her own. It was immediately apparent to anyone looking at Piper that she had returned. Her shoulders straightened, her eyes filled with intelligence, and a smile took to her lips. "Like I always said, Conrad," Piper quipped, "you just can't keep a good girl down." The cheer that rose from the throats of children was deafening. "Yes! Piper's back! We're gonna be free!" Violet threw her arms around Piper and squeezed every bit of air out of her. Electrical sparks spontaneously flew off of Kimber, while the tears that clouded Smitty's vision prevented him from even catching a glimpse at Piper's underwear. As for all the rest, there weren't enough hugs or sighs or joyful smiles to even begin to contain their gratitude and joy, except of course for Conrad. Conrad's head hung low, his eyes stinging from the painful reminder of his deception, his heart so full of remorse and guilt it had no harbor for the joy. "Conrad?" Piper grabbed hold of Conrad, ecstatic to see him. Conrad crumpled and then regained a tentative control. He had thought he wanted Piper to tell him how to find answers, but standing before her, he knew that he'd made yet another mistake. He didn't want answers, he wanted forgiveness. Lifting his eyes, which were heavier than solar systems, he met Piper's gaze. "Piper, it was me. I told Dr. Hellion. I betrayed you all." End of chapter, I don't remember number 18. Ah, so good. Anyway, that is the end for today. Tomorrow we shall finish it up. Very excited. Yeah. So yesterday I found out that the third book of this series just came out like in January. Like I didn't even know that a third one was coming out. And they're also all of these books are now an audiobook now, which I had also been waiting for like years, which is what actually why I wanted to read this because I want an audiobook of this, but it's an audiobook now. So, I do have the second book. Um, we could continue reading that, but like I said, it's also an audiobook too, so I don't know. We'll figure it out. We'll see what happens. But yes, I'm very excited. I love you all very much. I have to read back all your funny comments now. You guys are great. Anyway, I love you guys. We shall hopefully see you tomorrow, depending if my internet keeps working or not. We'll see. Hopefully it will. But bye guys. I love you.